That's where I first learned about Jesus Christ and His catch.
Philip Latak said.
They mark me for success.
Another peal of laughter.
Bus shuddered into the first gear as it dipped down the gravel road, and in a while they were in the town, along in the main street lined with the wooden frame houses. It conformed with the usual small town arrangement, and was properly palissaded with a store, whose front were plastered with impities of sufferings and patent of medicine signs.
And in the store were crowds of people habitualled Ifugao and G-string and tattered western coats that must have reached them in relief packages from United States. The women wore the native gay blouses and skirts.
The two travelers got down from the bus and walked to one of the bigger houses, a shapeless wooden building with rusting tin-proof and chip-printed curtains. It was a boarding house, and a small curious store was on the ground floor, together with the usual merchandise of country shops: canned sardines, squid, milk, soap, matches, kerosene, a few boats, and
The
twine.
landlady, an acquaintance of Philip Latak, assigned them a bare room, which overlooked the creek and the mountain terrace to the very summit.
We could stay in my brother's place.
Philip Latak reiterated apologetically as they brought their things up.
But there is no plumbing there.
Past noon, after a plentiful lunch of fried Highland rice and venison, they headed for the footpath that broken from the street and disappeared behind a turn of hillside. The walk to Philip Latak's village itself was not far from the town, and whenever they turned, the terraces were sheets of mirror that dogged them.
The village was no more 10 houses in the valley, which were no different from the another Ifugao homes. They stood on stilts, and all their four posts were crowned with circular rats carved. A lone house roof with a tin stood at one end of the village.
My brothers.
Shall I bring the candies out now?
Sam, as he had at Phil's suggestion, brought them along, together with matches and cheap cigarettes, for his private assistant program. Sadek, Philip's brother, was home.
You have decided to visit us after all.
He greeted Philip in English and with a tinge of sarcasm. He was older and spoke with authority.
I thought the city had won you so completely that you have forgotten this humble place and its humble people.
Then, turning to Sam, Sadik said,
I must apologize, sir, for my brother, for his bringing you to this poor house. His deed embarrasses us.
We work in the same office.
Sam said simply, feeling uneasy at hearing the speech.
I know, sir.
Philip Latak held his brother by the shoulder. You see, Sam, he said, my brother disliked me, like my grandfather. He feels that I should have left his place, that I should root here. Hell, everyone knows that terraces are good for the eye, but they can't produce enough for the stomach.
That's not a nice thing to say.
Sam said wearily, not wanting to be drawn into a family quarrel.
But it's truth.
Philip Latak said with a nervous laugh.
My brother disliked me. All of them here dislike me. They think that by living in Manila we are furious. I have forgot what is to be an Ifugao. I can help it. Sam, I like it down. Grandfather, do you know that one day I left, he followed me on the town to the bus, pleading with me and the same time scolding me. He said I'd get his terrace, but I like it down, Sam.
He threw his chest and yawned. Unmindful of his younger brothers hurrying, Sadek dragged in some battered chairs from within the house and set them in the living room. He was a farmer, and the weariness of the working terraces showed in his massive arms, in his sunburned and stolid face. His wife, who was an Ifugao like him, with high cheekbones and firm, dumpy legs, came out and served them Coca-Cola. Sam Christie accepted the drink, washed it down his throat politely, excruciatingly, for it was the first time that he took warm coke and it curdled his tongue.
Grandfather had a high fever, and we all thought the end was near. I didn't want to bother you, but the old man said, "You should come. He is no longer angry with you for leaving. Pig, he has forgiven you."
There's nothing to forgive, my brother, but if he wants to, he can show his forgiveness by opening his wine jar. His drinking still.
He has abandoned the jar for some time now, but now that you're here, he will drink again.
Then the children started stealing in, 5 of them with grime on their faces, their feet caked with mud, their bellies shiny and disproportionately rounded and big. They stood wide-eyed near the sagging wall. The tallest and the oldest, a boy of 13 or 12, Sadek pointed out as Philip's namesake.
Philip bent down and thrust a fistful of candy at his nephews and nieces. They did not move. They hedged closer to one another, their brows, their simple faces empty of recognition of that simple spark that would tell him, Pig, that he belonged here. He spoke in the native tongue, but that did not help either. The children held their scrawny hands behind them and stepped back until their backs were pressed against the wall.
Well, you are all my relatives. Are you give it to them? Maybe they like you better.
He asked, turning to Sam.
His open palm beaming with the tensor rough sweet. Sam strode to the oldest, to Philip's namesake, and tousled the youngster black. Made the hair he knelt, pinched the cheeks of the dirty child next. To the oldest and placed the candy in his small hand. In another moment, it was all noise, the children scrambling over the young American and about the floor, where the candy had spilled.
Philip Latak watched them, and above the happy sounds, the squeals of children, Sadek said,
You see, now that even your relatives do not know you, Pig, you speak our tongue. You have our blood, but you're a stranger nevertheless. See what I mean, Sam?
He strode to the door. Beyond the battle, not clams in the yard, up a sharp incline, was his grandfather's house. It stood on 4 stilts like all the rest, and below its roof were the bleached skulls of goats, dogs, pigs, and carabaos, which the old man has butchered in past feast. He had the most number of skulls in the village to show his social position. Now, new skulls would be added to his collection.
Well, he will recognize, and I won't be a stranger to him. Come and let us see the old man.
Philip Latak turned to his friend.
They turned up the hill, which was greasy, although steps had been gouged out on it for easier climbing. Before going up the slender rungs of the old house, Philip Latak called his grandfather twice.
Sam Christie waited under the grass market that extended about the doorway. He could not see what transpired inside, and there was no invitation for him to come out.
However, Sam could hear Philip speaking in his native tongue, and there was also a crackled old voice, high-pitched with excitement and pleasure.
And listening to the pleasant sounds of the homecoming, he smiled and called to mind the homecomings he too had known, and he thought how the next vacation would be. His father and his mother at the back bay station, the luggage in the back seat, and on his lap this wooden idol, which he now sought, but after a while the vision he conjured were dispelled.
The effusion within the hut had subsided into some sort of spirited talking, and Philip was saying,
Americano, Americano.
Sam heard the old man raise his voice, this time in anger and not in pleasure. Then silence, a rustling within the house, the doors stirring, and Philip easing himself down the ladder. On his face, a numb, crestfallen look, and without another word, he hurried down the hill, the American behind him.